Welcome to the first edition of And Then I Wrote, the show that puts the high in high culture, the pop in pop culture, and the low in, well, let's hope we don't get that low. I'm your host, Scott McCrea, and if you like books, or even if you've only read one, this is the podcast for you. So settle in and get ready for another adventure with And Then I Wrote. For our first edition, we are delighted to welcome author Andrew Weston. Andrew has written westerns, you can call them Western westerns, science fiction, military fiction, and horror. And here he is today. Welcome, Andrew Weston.
Hi, Scott. It's nice to be here. It's a bit of a mix there I've got there in the background. You know, variety is the spice of life, I suppose.
Speaking of variety, I understand you're talking to us from Greece.
Yes, one of the islands.
What island are you on?
I'm on Kos Island, which is in the Aegean Sea, just off the coast of Turkey. It's closer to Turkey than Greece, really. And yes, we're enjoying a spot of rain at the moment, and about time too.
So when people think of Greece, they're always thinking about ruins. Are you near ruins?
Yes, yeah. Oh, I'm surrounded by them. Just up the hill from us, there's a place that used to be the University for Hippocrates. The people know it as the Hippocratic Oath, the birthplace of modern medicine. And just along the beaches, they're underneath, the ruins are everywhere, underneath buildings, underneath beaches. Some of them are open and others get exposed during the winter months, like we have here in Greece at the moment, when we do get quite severe storms and the sea churns up the beach and it will just expose ruins everywhere. And there they are, just laid out for you to go and have a look.
And you can just walk up to them.
Well, yeah, you can walk up to them, walk around them. People are very good. It's a different type of culture, I tell you, because I'm from Britain, and if it was, it'd be gone.
You don't sound Greek, yeah, I know.
Yeah, it'd be gone. You know, they'd be gone. I'm ashamed to say, but here in Greece, they're just there, and nobody ruins them, steals any bits and bobs or anything. You know, they just leave them. It's part of the landscape, and yeah, they don't care.
That fascinates me. We went to see Angkor Wat, and I expected, so I'm here in the United States, and everything worth seeing is usually behind plates of protective plastic.
Yeah.
So when we got to Angkor Wat, I was shocked that people are just climbing all over this thing and chipping little bits of it away as souvenirs.
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself, in 50 years, there'll be nothing left of Angkor Wat but a pebble. So
such a shame. Yeah. I mean, it's a shame, yes, because you've got that memory, that you can capture it forever, but to actually be there, if you just leave it, it's there for everyone to enjoy. And, that's one of the things I do like about their culture, about their approach to life. They'll just leave them. They don't, it's the odd tourist, unfortunately, will try and take bits, but yeah, what a shame.
So how did you end up in Greece?
Prior to moving here, I was in the military and then in the British police force, and I was injured on duty, in and out of hospital for 2 years. They said I'd never walk again. Actually, that severe. I had a number of operations and so on. And, I fought my way back to health, basically, but it meant I couldn't be operational any longer. And I needed, because of the nature of some of the operations, a warmer climate. And as you do, I was looking at somewhere Spanish. My wife preferred Greece, so you take these, you do what your other half wants. And so we ended up here, and boy, did it help. It's the food is healthier, the climate, especially during the summer months, is healthier, although in recent years it's got obscenely hot. But yes, it helped me get better, and I now can run again, because I've always been into fitness. I was like training before school when I was like 4.5, 5 years old. So I've always been active. But now I've been able to regain quite a healthy and active lifestyle again. Thankfully, because of moving here. In Britain, that wouldn't have happened because it's just so cold and damp. And although I'm not made of metal, you feel it. You do feel it, and the climate does help. And of course, the food. The food here is marvelous.
I'm glad you didn't listen to your doctor. He said you can't walk again. I'm like, nah, I will walk.
Spinal damage and so on. Although one interesting thing from that, I found out that I'm immune to morphine and things like that it doesn't work on me. So yes. Well, one of the pain managers, I had to go spend a week in hospital where they were trying all sorts of opioids, and it just doesn't work. I get the bath mat tongue, itching, the side effects of it, and yeah, it just doesn't work on me. So that was fascinating to find out. But yeah, there you go.
Whenever I'm in pain, I just drink heavily.
Yeah, vodka. Yes.
So before we get to your writing, it sounds like you've had this fascinating past. So you were in the military and a policeman?
Yes, I was in the Royal Marines, British Royal Marines, as you call it, the Green Berets. It's part of the British Special and Elite Forces, which they still are. You know, it's a wonderful, wonderful time. I left because it was putting a strain on my family because you're away from home an awful lot, and the nature of your work as specialists. You know, it even in peacetime, you do things that the normal military don't. So yeah, I left and left on it's funny, 14th of March. I left the military on the 15th. I started with the police. I went straight in. Some of my the things I used to do followed me because they use me in various capacities within the police. Busman's holidays over to America to train gang task forces and the Texas Rangers, things like that.
Wait a minute. So you're telling me you went from being a British commando to a policeman to come into the United States and training Texas Rangers?
As part of the gang task
Wow.
forces, yeah, it's just as unarmed defensive tactics, just an exchange of ideas and operational procedures, for breaching and taking down bad guys. Yeah,
So if you had to, could you kill me with a pencil?
wouldn't need a pencil, just a pencil sharpener.
Just if then I'll be careful what I say from now
No,
on.
no, I'm getting old now. I'm mellowed. I'm mellowed.
So did you have a lot of sort of hairy experiences, either as a commando or a policeman?
Yeah.
And did a lot of that bleed into your fiction, or is it
Yes.
like a separate world?
Um, I have. Some of my best fiction does involve military components to it, shall we say. I write good military science fiction or anything to do with the military because there's that old adage, isn't there? Write what you know. So if I can incorporate that, because I know what there's more to shooting guns and bang, bang, pew, they duck in a duck. There's a smell to it. There's a taste in the air. There's an atmosphere. There's the way the body reacts, the way your vision can sometimes like tunnel in, and so this mood, this ambience, a vibe that takes over, and it's different. The sound of incoming bullets, you can tell what caliber they are sometimes. Just by the sound of it, you can. It's all sorts of factors. So yeah, I do enjoy writing combat scenes. One of my most widely selling works. It was an international bestseller. Incorporated a lot of military combat scenes in it. So there you
Which
go.
book was that?
That was the ninth. It was a science fiction book. Do you want me to explain a bit about it or
Please,
not?
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, I've always had a very vivid imagination. And this one came about. It's funny. I'd been to a reunion dinner with the military, and we were talking about what happened to the fabled lost 8th Legion of Rome. Because it's an actual legion. Now, the thing is, when you say about a legion, some people think, oh, yeah, they marched north of, Hadrian's Wall, as was later built. They marched into Caledonia, as it was then, in about the 100 AD, and they were never seen again. And then we're not talking about a troop of soldiers here or, a squad of things like this. A legion was about 5,000 strong. 5,000 made up of all sorts of. You just didn't have the soldiers. Sometimes you had senators there. You had the ancillary staff, the animals. It was a massive entity, and it just disappeared. And it's intrigued historians, for thousands of years. What happened to them? It's been the subject of films. I think The Eagle was based on the Ninth Legion of Rome, and we've been talking about this. And then I came home, and I'm thinking about it. And then a film came on television. It was first released in 1979 called Millennium. And I don't know if you remember it, it's with Cheryl Ladd and Chris Christopherson. And basically the premise was society in the future, the earth had been ruined and they were repopulating the earth, but there was no humans left hardly. So what they were doing was coming back through time and snatching people away, for example, from the scene of a plane crash. Because it was history to them, that many people, they'd take them away and replace them with like DNA duplicates. So yeah, they still die, but these people are then allowed to, repopulate the earth. So cutting all that down. So I thought, hey, wonder what happened if that was what happened to the Ninth Legion of Rome. something happens, because they just disappeared. 5,000 troops and, and all that huge entity, they just disappeared. And so I thought, what happens if that? So that's what I did. They were snatched away to go and help someone else defeat, a seemingly invincible enemy. And to spice it up a bit, I had obviously the Roman legionaries and the Celts that were fighting against. I used cowboys and Indians as well, from a different time frame. And for that one, I made up a fictitious U.S. cavalry unit who were on a secret mission from the then presidential candidate Abraham Lincoln, taking a peace offering to the Crow Nation. And then I brought it up to date, right? Like a special forces unit fighting an anti-terrorist on the anti-terrorist wing, fighting people who were threatening to blow up some of the oil rigs in the North Sea. So, and so they're all snatched away and taken somewhere else and thrown together. And the premise was fight or die. So they're snatched away at the moment they would have died, because they all, history says they died, and boom. So they're put into this new scenario. And yeah, and it's just.
So you were watching that movie on television?
And that gave me the idea, yeah.
But I mean, would you have attacked it as a historical novel if you didn't see that, or is that how ideas happen to you?
I called it a historical one because obviously the Ninth Legion actually existed and they disappeared. No one knows what happened to them. So I thought, well, what if that happened? And didn't. I made sure that all the fighting style, and you've got to do a lot of research. So I made sure that the fighting styles, fighting formations and so on, that were accurate, historically accurate for the legions, for the Celts, for the cavalry at that time, jumping forward through time to the cavalry unit, for the Crow Indians, because as you know better than I do, the different Native American tribes and so on, they had different styles of fighting. Some were horsemen, some weren't. And then, of course, the aspect that I know about, up the other end, were anti-terrorist units, and thrown together, fighting, this really, really, really difficult to beat foe, and it was good fun.
You've also written a horror novel for Raven, right?
Yeah, the Cambion Journals. That one was inspired by a repetitive dream. I've always had repetitive dreams. Yeah, I used to live in a haunted house between the ages of 2.5 to about 12. A genuine, real life haunted house with very strange happenings, manifestations, things moving, and so much so that even the animals that we had at the time were affected by it. Yeah, oh yeah, and I'm sure that
Where was the haunted house?
It was in Birmingham, the second city of England, and this street had been built over an old graveyard, and a child had been murdered. We didn't know at the time. Of course, we move in, and then things started out. At first, it was our dogs. They would prick their ears up and look toward a certain area. Then things would started moving. Then I'd be pressed down in the bed. We were pressed down. Sometimes people were pushed down the stairs. Things like that. And the dreams, or what some people would call horror dreams, but I found them really exciting. I've always had a bit of a adrenaline junkie, and even as a kid, being chased by this bladed thing, it was because I could fly in the dreams. I found it exciting and exhilarating, and sometimes use them as inspiration, which is what I did for the Cambion Journals.
Yeah.
For Raven.
I'm actually envious of that, because I would have loved to have had, or to have, some kind of experience like that of the supernatural. The closest I ever came is for reasons that are too long to go into here. I hadn't seen my mother for many, many years, about 18 years. And my better half and I are driving down the Long Island Expressway, and we were passing the exit where we would get off to see her.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, I hadn't seen her in years, and I said, "Let's go and see my mother."
Yeah.
There was nothing here to make me think of her or whatever. We get to the house and there's no one there, and she was always home. So I was surprised that nobody answered the door. And then I got home and there were calls from my kid brother telling me that she had had a stroke and was in the hospital. And that happened as we were driving past on the LIE to go. So that's the closest I've had to, I guess, a sort of paranormal experience.
Would you like a really spooky one then? I'll make it very brief because I don't know how
Oh,
long
please.
you want the show. Okay. My father was originally from the London area and was moved to Birmingham because he was one of the evacuees. So my grandmother and father moved from London, the Finchley area, to Birmingham. A lot of his family was still back in Finchley, and we used to go and visit them. And the first time I visited as a child, I was only 5 or 6. We get there, and we're just happily playing away, and spent the entire weekend there. Cutting a long story short, and then as we're in the car starting to travel home, this is where it'll come out. My mum turns around in the car because we had one of those old bench cars with the bench seats and the console, I think it was. Did you enjoy your weekend? Yeah, I enjoyed playing with so-and-so. And I mentioned the girl's name, Annie. And she goes, what? I says, oh, yeah, we had a great weekend. And she says, what do you mean, Annie? I says, the girl, the daughter. She was great. She was the one. Because while we were there, my sister disturbed an ant's nest out in the garden. And she was covered in ants. No one knew, but Annie come in to tell me. Jane, your sister Jane, she's been covered. Says, oh, mum, quick. She's covered. They went out, washed down, covered her, things like this. Transpired, Annie had died the year before. We went, I'd seen her, and they turned round, drove back to the house and said, tell your Uncle Ol and your uncle and aunt what happened. So I just said, yeah, I've been playing all weekend. We went down the park together, blah, blah, blah. Annie, yeah. And who? What do you mean, Annie? I says, her. And I pointed to the mantelpiece where they had a picture of her before she died. She died from leukemia. And unfortunately, it transpired that ran in our family. My grandmother died from it and someone else in the family died from it. And I says, yeah, I've been playing with her all weekend. And they were like, and she died the year before.
How old were you at this point?
5.
Good Lord. Wow.
She was 8. She died when she was 8. And seriously, and I'm not just talking, I thought it was a child. I thought it was another person because her brother, I think his name was Dennis. Yeah. And we were like laughing and giggling in the evening. And it's funny, there was an interaction. And when I think back of it in later years, do you know, what's the film with Bruce Willis? Sixth Sense. Remember that, how cleverly done it was that they've done the scenes. Yeah, he's talking to, and the interaction between me and the son and it was, kids sometimes have make-believe friends, but she was there. She was real. We talked. It's strange, but there you go. I've cut that down.
No, but it's a remarkable story.
But it's, yeah, and she was there and I could explain what she was wearing and, a little saying of how she looked and everything. And they were like, but you've obviously seen the photograph and, yeah, but they wouldn't talk about it. I said, well, yeah, I was able to say her name and what she liked to do. And this is what her favourite food was. And, because she would say, oh, I like so-and-so. And like when the ice cream van, we used to have ice cream vans come around in Britain and, which particular ice cream was her favourite. And they were just like white, strange. There you go. Sorry, that took us off at a tangent.
No. So how did you transition then from writing science fiction and sometimes horror over to Westerns?
Well, Nick, one day he said, have you ever considered writing a Western? And so we got to chat and I says, well, I have in a way with the Ninth, because remember that story was an amalgamation of people from different time periods. And, the cowboys and Indians, as it were, from that time period were taken through time. And I had to do quite a bit of research for it. And he said, so have you ever considered wanting to do something for Dusty Saddle? As you call it, was it a season? The 6 books? And because they're short books, I mean, like all 6 would be one of my old books. So I thought, at first I was like intrigued. Then I got interested. And then I was like, then it was like a little bit terrifying because just a cowboy thing with no elements of science fiction or fantasy. And it was like, I thought, well, no, I dipped my toe in the stirrup, as it were. And so I thought of a concept. God, the research, though. I mean, yes, I've been to America, as I mentioned before. And because I know with Westerns, it's a very specific genre and there's a very specific audience, isn't it? They've got,
that knows everything. You have to be careful.
Oh, yeah, that's what I mean. The Old West, the code of the West. Yeah, but so it was a hell of a lot of research. And there was a tendency, perhaps, shall I base it in Texas? Because I'm from little old Britain. I always remember one of the times I was at very quick asides. We've just got to go to the post office. Now, in Britain, if you say that, it's 5 minutes down the road. We're on this highway going to this, what turned out to be a federal building in the middle of nowhere. And I looked that way to the horizon desert. look that way to the horizon desert. That way was I think it was Fort Worth Metroplex behind. And we were just, where are we going? And, it's over. You've got shopping malls there in America, which are bigger than some of the towns I've been.
I have to tell you,
Yeah,
so like
yeah,
I told you, I'm an ex-New Yorker.
yeah,
I like to think of myself as a
yeah,
recovering New Yorker.
yeah,
But I had a very good friend. I have a very good friend in
yeah,
Oklahoma, and I was living in New York.
yeah,
And there's a Tom Mix Museum, and I was telling him that there's a Tom Mix Museum in Dewey, Oklahoma, and he said, "Oh, that's just
yeah,
right near me." And I said,
yeah.
"Oh, it's right near you. Would you mind very much dashing
Ah,
over and getting me a Tom Mix wristwatch?" And he said, "Well, Bob, it's 3 hours away." I said, "But you said it was right near you." He said,
yeah,
"Well, in Oklahoma, 3 hours away is right near you.
yeah,
In New York,
yeah,
right near me is I
yeah,
tumble out of bed in my underwear and go to the deli on the corner. I mean,
yeah.
it's a very different world."
But you see, that's the adjustment I had to make because there's me, I'm from little old Britain. And, like for there, again, I had to, like for one of the commando stories I'm also doing for Dusty Saddle, the fields in Normandy were tiny. British ones are bigger. They are rambling and, they're beautiful. But in America, like those plains, it's from where you're standing to the horizon. So you have to adjust your perspective, to fit the story in it. And then find out, well, how long does it take to ride on a horse from there? How far away is the horizon at that elevator? Blah, blah, blah. So, as I say, it was a bit scary. But to get it right, I did a lot of research and then try to think of something a little bit different of the about the immigrants moving in, because they weren't, just English. There were, a lot of people from Sweden, from Germany, and things like this. And of course, the ethnicity of them as well. So I thought, oh, I'll mix it up a bit. The Pearl brothers, you get white pearls, black pearls, and so we've got these two guys who grew up. His family were like plantation owners. The other was the son of one of the main workers, but they grew so close. They were like brothers. And they
Right.
continued that way after the war. The Pearl brothers, one black, one white. And it was great concept. And, they're like that. They're inseparable. Well, they were like blood brothers. It was a great concept and chose a place where they live in Kansas. And of course, then it meant finding out about Kansas and what trails were in at the time and how far the railroad had progressed, the thing that opened up the West, which were the Native American tribes lived in that area. And it wasn't just, of course, against settlers, but were they, a little bit fractious with each other. And so, yeah, there's a hell of a lot of research, but yeah, I quite enjoyed it in the end.
So you had mentioned Nick. I should tell our listeners that Nick is Nick Well. He's the publisher at Dusty Saddles
Yeah.
or DSP. How did you end up with Dusty Saddles or DSP?
Well, actually, it was through Raventail, the sister company, because was looking for something a little bit different, and I happened to see a call for stories and for their, dark fantasy and horror side. So I thought, oh, I made an approach, and yes, please, they had some stories on me of both dark fantasy and horror, and from that, Nick, I think, obviously liked a little bit of what he saw, and yes. Yeah, do you want to write a cowboy series? So I did. I tried. This has been a great learning curve for me because it's just added a little bit to your arsenal, as it were, that you can bring to the field. And very, very different. And it's, of course, the ethos of the Old West is it's a great concept that you can put into so many stories. So, yeah, the Code of the West.
Yeah. Well, actually, I love westerns. I mean, I write a
Yeah.
lot of different things as well, but I like westerns because there's an honesty to them that
Yeah.
you don't find in other genres.
Yeah.
I'm tempted to say an almost biblical quality because everything boils down to basic questions of humanity. And you're in Greece. I mean, there's also a sort of Greek drama element of
Yeah.
the chorus going, telling you what's going on, and these are basic elemental questions of what it means to
Yeah.
be human and what it means to be a man, and justice and whether revenge is justifiable or not. I think it's just so incredibly rich. If you want to
Yeah.
be a writer and you want to write about people, you could do westerns forever
Yes.
and be perfectly satisfied.
Yeah. Because I came to know it was like almost you're living on the cusp of two worlds. Like there's, you know, modernity coming in, but also the old way of living. It was self-sufficiency, the masculinity. The men had to be men, and and others other people had to know their place, as it were. But yeah, it was that fighting and working hard for what was yours, protecting it, and yeah, it's a very, very, very interesting genre that I've thoroughly enjoyed.
So speaking of protecting, so you've also written commando books.
Yes, I wrote a standalone, standalone Red Right Hand. It was a military book, military there. And then because I noticed that Dusty Saddle were also starting to do World War II books, I thought, I had a chat with Nick again. And I said, because I do enjoy writing things about the military. And I thought I would base it on my old my corps, the Royal Marines, and I would base it on 47 Royal Marine Commando, who came ashore on D-Day at Gold Beach, and then it just follows their exploit. The storyline actually follows their route through France into Belgium, into the Netherlands, and so on before they go on to Berlin. Obviously, it's fictionalized, but some of the characters in it are they were there. They were real life officers and men alike, and as was their route, as are the battles that they fought. They like many others were really in the thick of it. A different style of warfare as well once they got to Normandy. Yeah,
And what's the
there
name
you
of this
go.
book again?
The series is World War II Commando Adventures, but the first one is the Battle of Port and Bessin, because after coming ashore at Normandy, their first operation, like some people don't realise that like Operation Overlord, the overall thing for D-Day, was just the title, if you want, for a lot of sub operations. So once they were ashore, they had to attack the port of Port and Bessin. So they had to like speed march, as it were, miles down the coast to join up with some of the United States forces, and then from there go on to Port and Bessin to capture a strategic port. So we'll base the first one on that actual battle, a turning point, the Battle of Port and Bessin. Then after that one, there's Operation Hold Fast, because then obviously they had to hold the ground they got. And then the last one is one of the most atrocious withering battles of their campaign is the island of Walcheren off the Netherlands, the head of the Scheldt estuary, and that's Operation Infatuate. That's the one I'm just currently writing, and that should be out in about a month's time.
And are you ending the series after the third, or are you thinking of another three, or?
Well, for those, it has to be because the commandos were only, shall we say, the units came about, the commando in answer to a call from Winston Churchill. He wanted a corps, as it were, of specialized units who could infiltrate and, covertly and do a lot of damage behind enemy lines. Although they, like everyone else, had to come ashore in the first place under withering fire. Oh, it's terrible attrition. So their route was quite short. And then after the war, many of the commando units were disbanded until the role was handed on solely to the Royal Marines. So it's quite short. There's only three, but there will be other commando adventures.
With recurring characters from the first three, or are you going to create something new, or?
It may have to go on because, as I say, 4-7 Commando, once the war was over, all the other commando units, because at the time it was Army commandos as well as Royal Marine commandos, they were disbanded. The war was over, so they weren't needed. They're currently active now, so with many interesting things going on. So, yeah,
Yeah.
things that can be,
Oh, I'm
be written
surprised
about.
with your background that you haven't written a thriller.
Well, I did write a thriller. The Red Right Hand was the thriller based on a former Special Forces operative. On the day of his retirement, his family are murdered with a terrorist attack in London. And it follows, shall we say, the race between the security services trying to find out who the bombers were and him with all his skills and his contacts. And that's why Red Right Hand, the Red Right Hand of Vengeance.
And when did that come out?
That came out at the end of last year.
Okay, I have to look for that because I
Yeah.
love thrillers myself. Yeah.
It's a slightly longer book, but I really enjoyed that because there's places in that actually exist. Because again, write what you know, and especially around, and I love London. Oh, I do, I really do. There are places underground that, but anyway, yeah. So yes, and I really enjoyed that book. Yeah.
So, is there anything that you'd like to tell our listeners to be on the lookout for other than the next Commando book?
Yeah, the prequel really to the Pearl Brothers, because once I finish the Commander book, I'm going to write out a prequel, and the working title at the moment is Rough Justice, because as you know, in the Old West, sometimes justice was rough, even when it was right, and and people feel that's what should happen. And I've managed to find without giving too much away, an actual gang who were, so we say, prolific horse thieves, and that's one of the worst things, as you know, you could do. Yeah. Just steal someone's horses. And so, yeah, the prequel will be based on that, and it'll lead quite nicely into the Pearl Brothers. And again, that should be out, by the summer.
Excellent.
Definitely.
Okay. And I promised for Nick, our good friend Nick, that I would also plug a current Dusty Saddles book. So
Yeah.
I suggest our listeners get A Bullet for Diablo by my good friend Robert Hanlon. It's one of the Jake Timber books. I think it's particularly good. I read it all in the sitting and loved it. So again, that's A Bullet for Diablo by Robert Hanlon, available on Amazon. And I have been speaking with Andrew Weston, who writes westerns and other things. It's been a great pleasure. Now that you're an old hand at podcasting, maybe you'll come back.
Yeah, I'd love to. I really enjoy myself. I didn't know what to expect, but yeah, it's just having a chat, isn't it?
Having a chat.
Waxing lyrical.
Yeah, well, you can come to the States and wax my car. It needs it. All right, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.
So, once more, that was Andrew Weston. A big thanks to Andrew. Be sure to find books by Andrew and by yours truly, Scott McCrea, at Amazon. Thank you, and see you next time on And Then I Wrote.